All right, welcome to Stupid versus the Spread. We're talking Week 11 preview for NFL football, and then we'll recap some of our Week 10 happenings. Biggest storyline. Michael, would you like to apologize? Would you like to apologize
Um,
to Mr. Jeff Saturday?
I never blame Jeff Saturday. I blame Jim Irsay. I said
Okay.
that. I said that. You
You want to
check the tape.
apologize? You want to say you're sorry?
No, because this isn't going to work out. Jeff,
You
Jeff
sure?
Saturday is a great motivator, but they're not. They're not going anywhere. It's a cool win. I think it was the pregame speech that like the press conference he had after we recorded last week's episode was awesome. His postgame speech was awesome. He's a likable guy. I get it. I get why Jim Irsay hired his best friend Jeff Saturday to coach the team. I don't think this works out long term. I don't think that he's the right guy. I think he has a this feels very Coach Owe, um, in the sense of he seems like he's going to be a good interim, um, but I think if they give him more than a year, you probably end up with like a crash and burn scenario.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair.
A
Um,
great win for the Colts. I'm not taking anything away from them. That was awesome. That was a cool win. Matt Ryan looking like a young, spry, spring chicken, 34-year-old Matt Ryan, as opposed to whatever he is, 41.
mhm. So the other big news, we'll move on from Jeff Saturday. I think rightfully so. A lot of people got called out for horrendous takes where they were talking about him, which I found very fun and interesting. Um, I think you give the guy a chance. I mean, he's shown he can be a decent coach, and I don't necessarily hate the idea that a guy can come in and kind of take over a program, having been a football player for a long time. We'll see. It's an experiment. I don't think the Colts have much to lose technically. They're still kind of in the hunt for the playoffs, but not really. So we'll see.
Not in
The other,
not in the AFC, they're not.
yeah, not probably not. The other big news coming out of this week. So two big pieces of news. One, the Minnesota Vikings beat the Buffalo Bills in a obscenely crazy game. If you didn't watch it, the Vikings went for it on 4th and 1, didn't convert for a touchdown to take the lead. And then the Bills subsequently on the goal line, on their own goal line, fumbled the ball. The ball was recovered by the Vikings. Then the Bills drove down the field and then lost in overtime. So this marks the fourth time the Bills have lost in overtime. As of yet, they have not won an overtime game while Josh Allen was under center. So I'm sure that's pretty frustrating for him. And then the other big piece of news, the Eagles lose to the Commanders, are no longer undefeated, but still have tied for the best record in football at 8-1 with the Vikings. So we're starting to see the playoff picture. No one has clinched anything yet by any means. Um, what do you think was more of a fluke, the Vikings winning or the Eagles losing?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
I'll go for. I'll let you think on it. I'll go first. I think it was more of a fluke for the Vikings to win. The Eagles got dominated, like time of possession wise. Washington ran the ball down their throats. They really didn't have an answer for a lot after the first two scoring plays. By halftime, I think it was something like they had like 8 minutes, not even time of possession. And then there was some controversy with a late missed call on a face mask that wound up turning the ball over for Washington. I know some people were mad at the late hit on Taylor Heineke. That's like textbook
Yeah,
roughing the passer.
it
Like
was it was
you
called
simply
correct.
cannot do that. Yeah, it was called correctly. You might not like that it happened, but it definitely was called correctly. Um, and on the other side of the ball, don't get me wrong, the Vikings did well. They played well. They obviously won the game, but a first down fumble on the goal line on a quarterback sneak where the quarterback fumbles the ball from the snap is like a crazy incident. Like I don't recall ever seeing it in professional like NFL football. Um, So I think more just broke the Vikings' way than anything. So I don't think it was necessarily a fluke. I do think they're a good team. I know you don't, but I think it was more of a fluke that they won, given the given the kind of events that played out. I don't know if you feel the same.
I think in that sense, yeah, that the the Vikings win was more everything had to go right for the
Hmm.
Vikings to win that game. Justin Jefferson made one of the best catches we've ever seen,
Yep.
and and a handful of incredible plays in traffic. I mean, he dominated that game in the way NFL MVPs dominate games. If that were a Super Bowl, everybody would say that Justin Jefferson was the MVP of the Super Bowl. So there's no doubt in my mind that um, that Justin Jefferson was the reason they won that game. Having said that, he makes that one-handed catch in traffic, and then they go down to the goal line and still get stuffed. So they should
Yeah.
have lost the game. And if not for a fumbled snap in the one spot in that way where Josh Allen doesn't catch the ball directly from the center, because if he just catches the ball, he's 6'5", he runs like 2 yards probably at a minimum. They
Right.
get barely enough space to kneel it down, or they do it again, and the game's over. And so like everything that happened had to have happened the way it happened in order for Minnesota to win that game. Where the Eagles, you're correct. They it wasn't a fluke that they lost. They didn't play well enough to win. They had a couple key moments go against them. Some of them of their own doing. The Goddard face mask turnover was not really their fault.
Hmm.
Um, but the Quez Watkins one is, and that you could say that if they go down and if he stays up and he scores on that play, they go on and win that game. So partially their own doing, but you have to give the Commanders at least some credit in their ability to go out and win that game. Whereas I don't have to give anybody but Justin Jefferson credit for keeping the Vikings in that game, and maybe who Patrick Peterson made the pick at the end.
Yep.
Like there's only two people really on the Vikings that I have to give credit to for winning that game. So I'm going to keep hating on the Vikings. I don't think they're for real. I don't think they're a legit Super Bowl contender. I give them credit for going 8-1, maybe the luckiest 8-1. That we talked about this last episode. Um, Maybe the luckiest 8-1 we've ever seen. But as far as being a legit Super Bowl contender, I no, still no. Nothing that happened in Orchard Park on Sunday makes me think that the Vikings, absent a string of concurrent miracles, could beat the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles, and maybe you throw like a team like the Dolphins in there in the Super Bowl. I just don't
Hmm.
see how it, without a substantial amount of luck that could happen.
So, well, let's get into it then for playoff picture. We'll start to talk about this more and more. Obviously, as the season kind of comes to a conclusion, we've gone through trade deadline, we've gone through, most of the big games early in the season. So now come the important games towards the latter half. A lot of more, interdivisional matchups, stuff like that. So in the NFC right now, if the season ended today, you'd have Eagles number one, Vikings number two, which means the Eagles get the bye. Both are 8-1. Then you'd have the Seahawks, Bucks, and Giants, followed by the Cowboys and 49ers. Just outside of that, like on the fringe, would be Washington and the Green Bay Packers and the Falcons and Cardinals, all who are either 5-5 or 4-6, who in theory can kind of make their way up. I think the 49ers probably have a decent chance of holding that 7 spot. But it is very possible. I think we talked about this last week. It's pretty possible that either A, the Packers go on a run, which I don't think is impossible, or B, Washington kind of sneaks in with the rest of the NFC East. Um, and we get our first entire division makes it into the playoffs for the first time basically ever. On the other side of the ball, we got in the AFC Chiefs at number one with the bye at 7-2, Dolphins at 7-3 in the number two spot, and then the Titans and Ravens go 3-4 at 6-3. Jets, Bills, and Patriots all take the wild card. Um, with the Chargers, the Bengals outside of that bubble at 5-4. And then you really kind of get to the Colts, the Browns, the Broncos, which I think at this point have an outside chance. You think the Pats, the Chargers, and the Bengals all have the same record. So I truly don't know what that record breaker is right now, but obviously it doesn't matter because they still haven't played a majority of their divisional games and all that stuff. So really, you're just looking at record. So right now, that seventh spot in the AFC is essentially tied with three teams because we're not going to talk tiebreakers at week 12 or week 11. Um, so we talked about um, who we think is going to win the Super Bowl, yada yada yada. We'll start doing that later on. Who's your wild card teams in the AFC and NFC?
In the AFC, I think it'll be the Dolphins, the Jets, and I'm gonna go with the Bengals.
Okay.
Um, I think the Chargers might just be a little too banged up. Now they do get the benefit of playing worse teams in their division down the stretch, as long as they haven't played both games against the Broncos and the Raiders already. I know they've played at least one, but I believe both games against the Raiders. Um, and they had to have played at least one game against the Broncos, I think, although maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, down the stretch they also get the Ram. They finish the Chargers. Maybe I might go Chargers here because they finish the season at the Colts and then at home against the Rams and then at the Broncos. Um, Before that, they get the Chiefs, the Cardinals, and the Raiders. Two of those games are very winnable, and then the Dolphins and Titans. So they could go 500 or better down the stretch, which they're 5-4 right now, right? Or 4-5. Or
The
five.
Bengals are 5-4,
Bengals are
and the
5-4.
Chargers
Chargers
they're
are
all
also
five.
yeah.
Yes.
So if they go 500 down the stretch with 7 games remaining, they're or so I guess if they win, let's say let's say they go 4-3. That's 9-7. That should be good enough. I think a lot of people are saying there's a chance the AFC East gets all 4 teams in. I don't think that's realistic, given that they all still have to mostly play each other. So somebody's going
Yeah.
to get left out. I think that's the Patriots. I think it's a toss up between um, whether or not the Bengals or the Chargers get in. I'm going to pull up the
Hmm.
Bengals schedule right now. But I think just based on the division that the Chargers play in, they have a little bit of a softer landing, and that gets them there um, ahead of the Chargers. Because the Bengals finished the season. This is a gauntlet. They go to the Steelers, then to the Titans, then they're home Chiefs, home Browns with Deshaun, at Bucks, at Pats, home Bills, home Ravens. There's no way that strength of schedule is brutal down the stretch. I love Joe Burrow as much as the next guy, but it's going to be so difficult for them to just nudge out win after win after win without a perfectly healthy Jamar Chase and the offensive line really figuring it out. I think it's kind of too late for that. So I'm going to go wild card teams being the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Chargers.
I I don't hate that on the AFC side. For me, I do think the Chargers are a little too banged up to really make like an impression on me that suggests that they are going to make it in the playoffs. I can see the Bills not being the number one team in the East, but I think not it matters in terms of where you are in the bracket. But I don't see the Jets staying number two, so they'll probably fall to the number 6 slot, which means 5 is a toss up between the Bills and the Dolphins at this point, given how the Bills have played the past couple weeks, to be honest. And then I don't hate the idea of the Patriots getting in as it currently stands. The Bengals are really the only team I see, if they put it together, making it in. So the Bengals have, like you were saying, Steelers this week, then Titans, followed by Chiefs, Browns, Bucks, Pats, Bills, Ravens. So that is a gauntlet. If they figure it out, there's I think they can kind of sneak in because the opposite of that is that the Patriots, as we were saying, they kind of have to play everybody else towards the latter half of the season in their division. So they have the Jets this week. Then they play the Vikings, who, as we talked about, I believe is not a bad team. Then they have the Bills at home. Then they go to the Cardinals. That's probably winnable. Raiders. That's probably winnable. And then you finish up with Bengals, who will certainly be in the hunt. Dolphins and Bills again. So I could see a world in which the Bengals get a tiebreaker at the Patriots on Christmas Eve. Um, and then these teams kind of finish with the same record, but the Bengals would have that leg up and come away with it, so that you know the Bengals make it and the Pats don't. I really think the Chargers have looked really really weak throughout the season, so it would surprise me if they kind of pulled everything together with all of the injuries that they have, and they have an extraordinary number of injuries. Um,
The only so they get it looks like they're slated to get back Keenan Allen and Mike Williams this week. Both returned to practice today. So
mhm.
assuming no re-injury there, I think that could be not the cure-all, but I think that really changes the dynamic of the Chargers because if they can score, they have a defense even with all the injuries they have to be good enough to beat most teams.
Mhm.
And I think that's where my optimism comes from. But I don't know. I think it's gonna be. I don't really. I guess you say the Bengals have to win this week because, or I guess not this week, but they out of their next, they probably need to go 5-3 to really make sure that they're in, which would mean they've got to beat in all likelihood the Steelers, the Titans, the Browns, the Pats, and the Bucks, assuming they don't beat the Chiefs, Bills, or Ravens.
Mhm.
That's those are difficult must wins. So
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. On the other side of the ball, I think it's pretty safe to say the Eagles and Vikings, while they haven't technically clinched, will probably make the playoffs. I would put the Giants up there at 7-2, also in that position. I think when you look at the NFC West and the NFC South, I don't know if I see a Colt McCoy led Cardinals coming out on top in the West. So, and I certainly don't see the 49ers with Christian McCaffrey and how they've been playing as of late dropping enough games to drop out of the playoff picture. So I think it'll be hard for Washington to get in. I can see a world in which the Packers really start to make strides and maybe overcome even the Cowboys, because the Cowboys don't have an easy schedule if you look right now. So they're 6-3 right now, but the remaining games are against the Vikings this week. Then they have the Giants at home. They play the Colts and Texans in the early December phase. So that's probably 2 wins to include the Jags, but then they finish up with Eagles, Titans, and Commanders. And, if you think about where they're at in the playoff picture, you almost have to think they need 5 of those, right? 11 wins get you probably where you need to be to make the playoffs, but I don't know that they can. Like, there's a fluke in there somewhere. So maybe they power wash through the Colts, Texans, and Jags, but they still have the Vikings, the Giants, the Commanders, and the Eagles. None of whom, besides the Commanders. Oh, I'm sorry, they beat the Giants in week 3. So they have a decent divisional record. I think the Giants, if they don't make it somehow, it's because they really stumble in the second half of the year, but I don't see that happening. So honestly, the playoff picture for the NFC where it is, unless like a Taylor Heineke run Washington with, magic happens, or unless the Packers really have pieced things together after this past week, I don't see anybody else really flexing in and out of those spots.
yeah, I think the Packers are the real variable here because they have the most potential to really get right.
Right. I don't see the Falcons overcoming the Bucks down a win right now as it is.
Yeah, I mean that would be the only change. But if we're talking just the wild card, there's no NFC South contenders for the wild card. The nice part for the Packers is they still get the Bears and the Lions. and they get the Rams. The rest of their schedule is fairly difficult. They get the Titans, Eagles, Dolphins, Vikings.
Yeah.
So
The
I
only
mean,
so I will say this: the only way I see the Commanders or sneaking into the playoff picture, or possibly even the Packers if they're not in first in their division, is if the Seahawks start to show that they maybe aren't the team that we thought they were. Um, I think if they start to stumble, you'll see it this week. Will they lose to the Raiders, who have one win? Because if they do, then they play a string of teams that you think are bad, but might have a leg up if
no,
the
the
Seahawks aren't.
Seahawks are off this week. They get the Raiders next week.
Oh, I'm sorry. So they have the Raiders next week, so off a bye. But if they lose to the Raiders, they'll play the Rams and Panthers. You think those should be 3 wins that would set them up to be successful to make
Yeah.
it to the playoffs? Because the latter half of their schedule is pretty tough. They have 49ers at home. They play the Chiefs at Kansas City, and then they have the Jets at home on January 1st. So I could see if they stumble after this bye week and something goes wrong, which nothing has highlighted that it might. But if they fall to like the Raiders and the Rams before getting a win at the Panthers, then they might be in panic mode. Or I might be in panic mode if I'm a fan.
Yeah, I still don't see that as being likely. I think like I said, I think the upshot would have to be from the Packers, but you're assuming that they would have to tomorrow night, as we record this on Wednesday. Tomorrow night is a must win for the Packers, and then they have to probably go 4-2 at a minimum. Um, in their remaining 6 games, which means they have to knock off one of the Eagles, Dolphins, or Vikings. Um, and two of those are on the road, those being the Eagles and the Dolphins. So the Packers have a chance, but they really are going to have to do something like crazy here to really make it interesting. So I think the NFC playoff picture is starting to round into focus. The AFC is much more volatile.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. Just because of how many teams are pretty much neck and neck in the AFC, whereas the NFC has kind of separated itself. All right, so that was a little bit of talk about playoffs, where we're thinking everything's going to wind up. We'll move on to our week preview that we do every week. So we'll start off the bat. Titans at Packers. Packers are -3 at home on Thursday Night Football. The over under is 41. Mike, you got any picks for this one?
I think if we learned something from the Packers' performance last week is that I mean they hit Christian Watson with a few big plays to really get them back into that game because they were down 2 scores going into in the fourth quarter. So credit to
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers for pulling it off again. Um, but I think that their avenue to success comes from running the football. That's clearly the same for the Tennessee night game at Green Bay in November, the week before Thanksgiving. Means it's probably going to be fairly cold. I'll look up the
Yeah,
weather.
25 degrees Fahrenheit, no rain, but 12-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty nasty, winter conditions in Green Bay. Um, I think this is a close, physical, fun. I think it'll be fun in that sense if you enjoy that sort of football, like that tough, hard nosed, corned beef and chowder sort of football.
Big Ten
Um,
football.
yeah, Big Ten. Yeah, if you like Big Ten games, I see Iowa, Minnesota, and this game. Um, but I think that means that this goes under 41, especially in this weather, short week for both teams. This is going to be a difficult game to score points in. Both defenses are pretty good. Both offenses have their limitations, especially throwing the ball. Um, so I think 41's a lot here. I think the winning team will get over 20, but the losing team will definitely stay under 20.
Mhm.
So if you're saying that that's the case, um, you probably keep it under as long as it's not like 27-17 or something that
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the team that wins blows past 20 points. So when I drive to Virginia this week to place my legal wagers, I will be placing those wagers on Tennessee and Green Bay on the under.
I like that. I'll probably add that I think, you know, Tractor Cito season is made famous by, pardon my take, when they talk about how Derrick Henry later in the year, guys are a little more sore. It takes a little longer to recover. Getting hit hurts maybe a little more. add in some cold weather, and he can become a kind of a beast. Um, I like the Titans +3 here. I also like the under, just given their capability to run. I know a lot of people right now are kind of big on Green Bay, but I think the 6-3 Titans, who have kind of snuck by as being 6-3, can pull something out against a Packers team who might not be as good as we maybe got led to believe because of solely last week. So I'll lay
Yeah,
the points and I'll lay the under here.
I think when you look at last week, the Titans, they won and they covered, but they did so winning 17-10 against a good Broncos defense. So um, you can say that quarterback not named Russell Wilson wins that game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that goes to our point that this game should go under. I don't. I think I don't hate the idea of Tennessee covering. I think Green Bay has a much larger sense of urgency,
Mm-hmm.
so I think they find a way to win this game. I would expect that the Titans are not. Vrabel always gets his guys up for these games, but it feels like this is if this is a spot where they're going to have a soft lay down, like for them. This would be a spot, short week, tough conditions, cold weather game. It'll be a little bit more difficult than it usually is to get your guys up to play this game. Whereas I think Green Bay knows they really have to put it together here to even have a shot at the playoffs. So I think you'll see the Packers play with a little bit more sense of urgency. Wouldn't be a surprise if the Packers win, Titans cover, and this game stays under.
I like it. Okay, let's go to our 1 p.m. Sunday slate. So we have Commanders at Texans. Commanders are -3. Eagles at Colts. Eagles are -7. Rams at Saints. Saints are favored by 3.5. Bears at Falcons. Bears are 3.5 point underdogs to the Falcons. Jets at Patriots. Jets are 3.5 point underdogs. Lions at Giants. Lions are 3 point underdogs. Panthers at Ravens. Panthers are 13 point underdogs. Browns at Bills. Browns are +8. And that's our 1 p.m. slate in no particular order. Mike, go ahead. Give me your picks for the 1 p.m. slate.
So I have one, two, three, four, five. I have 6 plays on 5 games. Um, So let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to look up the last time the Jets. That was week 8, I believe. There it is. I'll get to that later. But the first one's going to be Carolina, Baltimore over 41. The logic here is Carolina's been scoring pretty decently recently. They've gone over 21 points, I think, in the last 4 games, and two of those games were against the Falcons, but the other two were the Bengals and the Bucks, who have decent defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore, we know, can score and does score on pretty much everybody. Their defense has been a little bit suspect so far this year, but they played better against New Orleans, which isn't really saying much because the New Orleans offense, led by Andy Dalton, is terrible. And you add all that up, add the fact that it seems like the Vegas bettors are slightly off the public tickets are 75% where on the under, whereas the cash in Vegas is 59% on the under. So it's not exactly a sharp play, but I still think that Carolina and or Baltimore find a way to get this game over. Um, I think the only thing that stops that here is if Carolina lays a complete egg.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of betting on Baltimore to kind of do the heavy lifting here and get into the 30s, and then if you get there, you just need 2 touchdowns from Carolina. So I'm going to take Carolina Baltimore over 41. I'm going to do the same thing over 41 Washington at Houston. This I'm sorry to say for your Commanders, this feels like a letdown spot to a
Huge
team
letdown spot. Yeah. 100%.
that needs a win. That's why you see the public cash split where it is 62% of tickets on Washington, but 80% of the money on Houston. But I think the bigger trend here is 64% of the tickets are on the under, 81% of the cash is on the over. So no matter what happens, I think Vegas and I agree. Think that this game they're going to score a decent amount of points here. Houston does have a terrible offense, but I think this is one of those games where things kind of go crazy, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some defensive touchdowns, some special teams plays, possibly a couple fake punts, just all sorts of mayhem going on all over the field, and that usually leads to points. So I'm going to take the over here. I think both of these teams can push the. I think both of these teams get in the 20s. I don't know who wins. I think probably Washington still wins in like a 24-21 sort of game with some, sort of craziness that goes on at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I like it to go over. So over 41 there. I'm going to take Cleveland plus 7.5. Popular pick here early in the week was the under with the weather. It looks like that weather's going to hit Thursday, Friday, as opposed to Sunday when it was originally predicted. Um, but as you pointed out to me earlier, 22-mile-an-hour winds for this game is going to force the running games to be important here, which still tends to lead itself towards the under. But I think Cleveland's the much better running team um, than Buffalo. Buffalo can't really stop the run. And if you think this game's going to be low scoring, yet somehow the Bills are going to cover 7.5 points with a defense that has looked suspect against the run, I don't really see how all of that adds up. So I don't think Cleveland wins this game outright, but I do think they keep it within a touchdown, especially if the weather is going to really keep Josh Allen from throwing the ball in the air. Um, I'm going to do a twofer on Philly Indy. I'm going to take Philly the under 44 and Philly -7. I know that seems counterintuitive because normally
Threading the needle, baby. I love it.
normally on unders you take the underdog just because less points means less opportunity to score more. But I think this is a if you were to give us this line a week ago, what do you think it would have been?
14.
Yeah, I think I would say at least 10.5. Philly minus 10.5. So I think getting it at 7 um, is winning based on where these two teams really are. I think Jeff Saturday, like we said, Jeff Saturday was a fun story last week. It's a huge win for his guys, but now they've got to turn around and play a team that's much, much, in fact, almost polar oppositely better in the NFL as compared to the Raiders. I get that they get them at home. But the worst thing that for Indianapolis that could have happened was that Philly lost on Monday night in a game where they looked terrible. I think this is a complete opposites, occur the way they normally do in the NFL. I think Philly blows them out. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm betting on this game to go under, but I'm doing so because I think this could be like a 38-3 sort of score where this stays under, but Philly just dog walks Indy. Um, so I'm going to take both of those. My last play in the 1 o'clock window, and this is what I was going to say, and you're probably going to make fun of me for this. I'm going to take the Jets money line. This is a rat line. The Pats are favored -3. Doesn't make too much sense when you look at the way the last game played out, which means take New England because this should really be closer to a pick 'em. Um, but I'm basically gonna trust that Zach Wilson's not gonna throw 3 picks because he threw 2 touchdowns and threw for 355 yards, and still only scored 17 points because he threw 3 points. The Pats, on the other hand, had I think was it 3 turnovers or 4? Nope, just 3. They had 3. Jets had 3 turnovers. The Pats had um, 10 more minutes of possession in this game, which is not the way the Jets have played all season. And
Right.
yet the Pats still put up 1 touchdown, one football touchdown. I think the Jets, if Zach Wilson doesn't turn the ball over, the Jets defense is playing well enough to stop whoever's playing quarterback for the Pats in a very serious way. And I think that if the Jets don't find a way to turn the ball over, they still find a way to punch it in at least 2, maybe 3 times. So I think that you know, there's an easy path to see where the Jets win this game. Now,
Yeah.
that probably means that Bill Belichick, because they're both coming off a bye, it's much harder to beat a team twice. But Bill Belichick owns the Jets, and he loves beating the Jets, as I'm painfully aware. So, um, that's the only thing that scares me, really. But I think these Jets are a little bit different. They've found a way to play with a chip on their shoulder all year. I think they get the monkey off their back this week. I like the Jets money line plus 133.
I like it. I got a couple picks for this week. Saints Rams under 39.5. Saints defense is fantastic. Rams are now without Cooper Cup. and the Saints can't score. I'm going to hammer this under probably 3 units. I this is I hate that I feel so confident about this bet because I almost feel like it's something fluky is going to happen and the Rams are going to show up for the first time in 6 weeks. But this should be under 39. There's no reason why this game would go over if these teams play like they've been playing. I like Bears plus 3.5. This is the same thing, kind of rat line-ish, it feels like. Justin Fields has looked really good the past 2 weeks. The Bears have been scoring points like they weren't doing the first 6 weeks of the season. The Falcons, I think, are due for a little regression to the mean, which was, they were ranked, I think, 30th or 31st in the league to start the season off. So I think they've room to regress here. I think the Bears win outright, but I'll take 3.5 points with them. I'm going to go Panthers plus 13 against the Ravens. I know the Ravens are good. I know they have the ability to score a lot. 13 points is just too many points for me to take the opposite. So anything over like 10 or 12, I've been taking every single time. I'm just going to ride it and hope they backdoor cover or just keep it close. I have the Browns Bills under 41.5 as well. I think I got it at like 42.5 before the line dropped to 41.5, but I'll have to check because I put this in early. But yeah, Bills have had trouble running the ball. Their defense hasn't looked great, but the Browns' offense looked pretty anemic the past couple of weeks. But historically, the Bills' explosive offense comes off of Josh Allen and his throwing ability, and in 22-mile-an-hour winds with freezing temperatures where it just snowed. Historically speaking, the Bills have performed poorly in those games. Not because of Josh Allen, but because of how their offense is schemed. They really don't have a great running game. So I'm going to take the under 41.5 here. I'm going to go Eagles -7. I think everyone's high on Jeff Saturday. I love it. I love that they're backing the guy, but I truly believe this line would have been 14.5 if the Eagles had beaten the Commanders handedly, which they did in week 2 of the regular season, or if the Colts had somehow lost and the Eagles had scraped by. So I think this is a blown out spread. I think the Eagles are a lot better than this Colts team. And then I'm going to tell you in the Jets money line, this Jets-Pats game, if you have nothing else to watch in the 1 p.m. slate, this will matter a lot for the playoffs. This is a big game just because the Jets and Pats are essentially tied in the standings, as we kind of discussed, and it's going to be really difficult for 4 teams in the same division to make a playoff game. So you need to scrap out every interdivisional win you can, and I do think the Jets are simply the better team, so I don't know why they're 3.5-point dogs at the Patriots. But I'm going to tell you on the Jets money line that stood out to me as an important game, and I think the Jets wake up for it. All right, we'll move on to our 3 p.m. slate. Luckily, we got 3 games this week after the NFL made the questionable decisions that they did, only putting 2 games for like the past 2 weeks. So we got Bengals at Steelers. Bengals are -3.5. We have Cowboys at Vikings, where the Vikings at home are 1.5-point underdogs. And then we have at 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time, the Raiders at Broncos, which I would stress to think is going to be a good game. But Mike, go ahead, give me your picks for this slot.
I only have one. I'm going to take Dallas -1. This goes back to my point that I don't think that the Vikings are for real. I am a little bit scared of the fact that Dallas is still favored, but Vegas is with me here. Dallas 74% of the cash, whereas Minnesota is getting 54% of the tickets. Another letdown spot. Another Dallas is better than they showed last week against Green Bay. This line might be significantly different if Minnesota loses that game the way they should have, and Green Bay loses that game against Dallas the way that they should have. Those games happen in the NFL. I expect a correction to the mean here. Minnesota's luck finally runs out. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have Michael Parsons eating his lunch all day long, and I'll take the Cowboys to get right and win this game.
Yeah, I don't hate that pick. I was leaning originally Vikings money line, but I think you, again, like off a big win, the Vikings off really 2 big wins the past 2 weeks. I think they're due to regress just a little bit. I can see them falling to the Cowboys for sure. I have two picks for this slate, so both are in the same game. I'm going to take the under Steelers Bengals under 41, and I'm going to thread the needle. I'm going to go Bengals minus 3.5. This Steelers team, they have the ability to wake up for like key games, but not interdivisional games sometimes. The Bengals desperately need to stay in the hunt. They desperately need to win this game. So I can see them really stepping up. Everybody and their mother is against this pick. I think 55% of the tickets are on the Steelers and 94% of the cash is on the Steelers as well. So I'm certainly going against the grain here, but I think even with 30 degrees Fahrenheit and 10-mile-an-hour winds, I think Joe Burrow comes out and has a statement game because the Steelers are very injured. Bengals obviously dealing with a lot too, but I think this is just one of those. If you're going to make the playoffs, the Bengals come out and win this game handedly. So we'll see.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. I don't have it on the card just because I think the 94% number scares me. But to me, it doesn't make sense. I think the idea is that the Steelers beat them the first time. They have T.J. Watt back. They're at home, and the Bengals don't have Jamar Chase. But the Bengals are coming off a bye. They're in a spot where they need to win these games. And Cincinnati played about as bad as you could play to open the season, and you could argue that was part of the Super Bowl hangover. Now, granted, they didn't look very good against the Browns. I think that was the last time they played, but it I still think the Bengals are significantly better, especially offensively. I don't see Kenny Pickett leading the Steelers to victory here. Um, 4 is a big enough number that it makes you think maybe the Bengals win by a field goal, but I like where your head is at on this one. I think I really like the Bengals in the spot. You have more balls than I do.
You're scared of it. It's okay. Okay, last two games of the week. Should be hopefully a decent one for Sunday Night Football. Kansas City Chiefs at Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers, as we've discussed, do need a big statement win, as well as a good winning record to make the playoffs as they're currently out of the picture. They are 5.5-point underdogs at home, the Chargers are, and the over-under is 50. And then we roll into our Monday Night Football game in Mexico City at Aztec Stadium. The 49ers are -8 at the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, at Arizona is um, a bit misleading because the Cardinals are not at home. This is in Mexico proper as part of this NFL, get bigger through other nations kind of thing. So, Mike, go ahead. Give me the picks you got for these final two games.
Um, I don't have any plays. I am so right now. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were both listed as limited this week in practice, but that's a better designation than either have had this the past 5-6 weeks. So if you get both of these guys back, and you remember that the Chargers should have won that game, but for a horrendous pick six threw by Justin Herbert that he basically made up for by single handedly willing his team down to cover the last contest in Kansas City. I think you add on the fact that Juju Smith-Schuster is out with a nasty concussion that he got in last week's game. Um, Jerick McKinnon was a limited participant in practice, who's been important for them. And the Chiefs seem to walk into some of these games and just find ways to not get up for some of them. I mean, they looked really good against the Jags last week, but the Chargers can at least, if they get both of these receivers back, they can at least keep up with them to some extent. So I'm not playing it, but I think the Chargers keep this within 5.5. I don't know if they win it, just because Mahomes is Mahomes, but I think this is going to be a close game, and I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers win this game because I think with those two guys back, there's a chance they again we talked about them and the Bengals both needing wins. This would be a big win for the Chargers team that has been fairly close. Didn't look good against San Francisco last week, but you could say that really is because they're on their fourth and fifth receiver. So um, I think if they get both of those guys back, this is a completely different game. I think they'll be juiced, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chargers win.
So I'm on the opposite against you here. I think
I'm not playing it, so I
okay.
I think it's It's too risky. It's Mahomes every time. I'm not playing it, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happened.
Yeah, so I have Chiefs minus 5.5 here at the Chargers. I think they're just a better team. I think they're going to show out. Um, it wouldn't surprise me if the Chargers won, but I do think this is one of those ones that the Chiefs don't sleepwalk into just because how the Chargers are. And the Chargers have a lot of injuries. Joey Bosa is still out. Justin Hopkins, their kicker, who's been a great kicker throughout the league for a couple of years, once with Washington and then the Chargers, is questionable. He has a hamstring injury, so that's always something to consider when you're looking at a 5.5 point spread. That could be a missed field goal here and there that pushes you to the line. And then a bunch of injured Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, all questionable, but probably going to play, but limited at practice or not 100%. So I lean the Chiefs, even with Schuster probably out for the concussion this past week. And then I have two plays for the 49ers Cardinals. One play and one lean. I'm going to go the under here, under 35.5. 49ers are a good running team. I think they're going to rely on their run game a little more here. This is a dome, so the weather doesn't really matter. But I think 44 points for an Arizona Cardinals team that is starting Colt McCoy, who I genuinely love. I don't think both these teams push that to 44 total points. I also like the Cardinals here. +8 seems just a tad much for a primetime game. Arizona's not terrible, and remember, Colt McCoy has had a very good couple seasons um, as a quarterback, as a backup, and that's presuming that Kyler Murray is out, which he is not currently ruled out. He's ruled as questionable for that hamstring injury. So I think right now the line is reflecting that Colt McCoy is going to play, and I don't think that's a bad play regardless. But I think if Kyler comes back, you're going to see this line jump way, way back to about +4. So I'm going to take the 8 points and see how it goes. Mike, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. Another exciting week of football coming up.
Yeah, looking forward to it. My name's Alex. That's Mike. We do one show a week for college football and NCAA football. Looking forward to talking more football. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.